Namaskar. This is Akhilesh Bhargav. Welcome to Tit-Bits on Business and Finance with me. COVID cases have been rising rapidly in India. Yesterday, they crossed 1,68,000, and that's a new high. But the fact is that a peak has not yet been reached. Even though the cases have been hitting a new high every day, the peak is nowhere in sight. A report of State Bank of India says that the earliest that this second wave of COVID is going to hit a peak in numbers is going to be around middle of May next month. And that means till then, on a daily basis, the number of cases are bound to go up. With social distancing having its own limitations, with vaccination going at a slow pace, the fact is that perhaps a lockdown, a stringent lockdown, is the only option left in order to break the chain of infection. A lockdown of sorts has already been imposed in many parts of the country. Maharashtra, where the virus has been raging in an uncontrolled fashion, expects a stringent lockdown to be imposed from Thursday, which is after the Gudi Padwa festival and the Ambedkar Jayanti getting over. In anticipation of a stringent lockdown and its debilitating impact on the economy, the stock markets reacted sharply and adversely today. The indices fell such that about 8.5 lakh crores of market capitalization evaporated in one single day. The fact is that any such lockdown of the nation, of the economy, disrupts the demand and supply chains in a major way. And the longer the lockdown, the more bigger is the disruption that takes place. The minimum that happens because of a lockdown is a slowdown in the economy, and the maximum that can happen is a contraction. The kind of contraction that we saw last year in the first 2 quarters of the financial year. As we head to yet another round of lockdown, which to us is extremely imminent, a number of findings have come out in surveys which talk about the kind of hardship, difficulties, and sufferings that our lives, our livelihood, our economy will face on account of a lockdown which is expected to be imposed. A survey of CEOs by the CII says that another lockdown will adversely impact the movement of goods and services, and that production is going to be impacted in a very significant manner. As per this survey, the CEOs expect that production will go down by at least 50% on account of this disruption in the movement of labor and goods that will take place because of the imposition of a lockdown. Yet another survey comes from the Reserve Bank of India, and that is the Reserve Bank's Consumer Confidence Survey. The survey says that consumer pessimism is at a very big high, and that the consumer remains pessimist about the present and is also not gung-ho about the future. The survey of RBI says that the consumer is not likely to spend, and that's because the general economic environment has been deteriorating. Prices have gone up, inflation remains elevated, and the real return by way of interest income has turned negative. Because of these factors, according to the Reserve Bank survey, consumer pessimism remains about the present and also about the future. Yet another survey on consumer confidence comes from the CMIE. The CMIE survey says that consumer sentiment and confidence in India fell by 46.8% in March 2021 as compared to what it was exactly a year ago in March 2020. It further says that the sentiment of the urban consumer fell down much more as compared with the rural consumer. And that's because the relief measures that were announced in the fiscal stimulus last year were primarily skewed towards the rural belt by way of Manrega, PM Kisan, etc. The urban consumer felt left out. The urban consumer truly did not get anything, and therefore his sentiment is down by 51.4%, much more as compared to the sentiment of the rural consumer. The CMI then says that except for the rich, all income groups are worse off now as compared to what they were last year, and therefore in order to kickstart consumer spending and demand in the economy, the CMI says that it is the higher income groups which will need to spend much more as compared to the other ones who do not have the capacity to spend or who are reluctant to spend for loss of confidence in their well-being. We at HW think that any further prolonged rounds of a lockdown in the economy will have a seriously adverse impact on jobs, on livelihood, on businesses, on consumer spending, on GDP growth, and of course, on the confidence of the consumer and the citizen at large. If a lockdown continues for a longer period, to us, more jobs will be lost, more businesses will close down, many more are going to lose their livelihood, and the consumers will revert back to spending on essential items and they will shun any spending on discretionary items, which is so important and needed in order to kickstart growth in the economy. The situation gets even more worse with the fact that the government has not announced any intention to come up with any fiscal stimulus should there be a lockdown in the economy. And we also notice that Reserve Bank's monetary policy has now come to some kind of a dead end. And therefore, unless measures are not taken appropriately, the chances of a revival in consumer sentiment and the chances of a durable recovery certainly go down substantially. After the Monetary Policy Committee meeting that took place in his customary press meet, the Reserve Bank of India governor tried to downplay the impact of a lockdown, the impact of COVID on the economy at present. He said that growth is of paramount importance to the Reserve Bank of India and that the RBI will do all that is needed in order to sustain growth, in order to try to ensure that durable, sustainable growth is achieved at the earliest possible. The Reserve Bank governor further says that the RBI will provide cheap, abundant and ample liquidity in order to provide funds that are needed to oil the wheels of the economy and to attain a sustainable, durable growth. He says that the stance of the monetary policy will continue to be accommodative as long as durable, sustainable growth is not achieved in the Indian economy. Just as the Reserve Bank governor downplayed the impact of yet another wave of COVID coming and an impending lockdown, even as Deputy Dr. Michael Patra did that, he also toned down the situation and painted a more reassuring picture. He says that the current economic situation on account of COVID coming back will not be impacted as much this year as it was impacted last year. The reason for that, according to him, is that the lockdown is far more selective this time, and that, unlike last year, this time, many units, many businesses, many establishments are fully operational and are far better prepared to face the second surge of COVID coming back. That was the stand of the Reserve Bank of India, which we think was just toning down the likely severity of a lockdown and COVID coming back. Then we come to what the IMF thinks. The IMF appreciates India's coordinated fiscal, monetary and regulatory response in order to tackle COVID. But it says yet another round of fiscal stimulus is needed, especially for vulnerable sections of society. They need to be supported, they need to be promoted. It refers to vulnerable households, it refers to the MSME units, it refers to the informal sector, all of which, according to the IMF, need yet another round of fiscal support from the Government of India. The IMF also thinks that additional policy reforms and measures are needed in order to reform India's banking and financial sector, and that the IMF says that India needs to grow at a much faster rate in order to make up for the contraction of the economy that occurred last year. And for that, according to it, you need a suitable monetary and fiscal response by the Government of India. We think that India, of course, needs to grow at a much faster rate, as the IMF says, but that would mean tackling the lockdown in a successful manner, and that, according to us, needs particularly a fiscal support from the Government of India. The fact of the matter is that the Reserve Bank of India and the Government of India do acknowledge that some kind of a support is needed, but the fact also is that both seem to be silent on the matter at the present. With yet another round of lockdown coming in case the government is not going to come out with a commensurate fiscal support, then do expect the impact on the economy to be far more grim, far more grave than what it was last year. This is Akhilesh Bhargav signing off till we meet again. Namaskar.
Hello everyone. HW News English is 2 years old now. When we started this venture, we promised ourselves one thing, that news should remain free, because right to know is the right of every Indian. But to keep news free for everyone, we need support from some of you. And thus, we have rolled out membership on our YouTube channel HW News English. But mind you, the membership is completely voluntary. The programs that we were doing earlier, that we are doing now, will continue to remain free. First level is a basic level. Here, you can be our supporter by paying rupees 199 per month. This membership gives you certain perks and benefits. The perks include unique badges in front of your name, a live show from Mr. Sujit Nair and from Mr. Akhilesh Bhargava per month for our members. You can also vote in some exclusive members-only polls. Now the second level is Super Supporter. Here you can be our Super Supporter by paying rupees 3,999 per month. This membership will include every perk that comes with basic level. Additionally, our Super Supporters can be a part of a WhatsApp group where we can have discussions and suggestions on various topics. The second perk includes a gift pack with our merchandise. And the third perk is a Google Meet with Mr. Sujit Nair, where you can join the meet and ask your questions to Mr. Nair face to face. Lastly, if you like, we would give a shout out to our super supporters in our programs. So, hope to see you soon with our badges.